وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So to quickly recap the last lesson, the first thing we covered was the conversion of Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. So he basically made a decision to kill the Prophet before he converted, that is, and he was very focused. When he had a goal, an intention to do something, he was very focused and very difficult to divert him. So as he was going, he was looking for the Prophet, couldn't find him, but he came across another person who told him, and he was a secret Muslim. When he found out that Umar's intention was, he told him to go look for his own sister and her husband, because they're converted. So that's the only thing he could think of to divert him from killing the Prophet. So that person could go and warn the Prophet. So Umar goes to his sister's house, finds them reading Quran, and he's in a blind rage. He starts bashing his husband, sister's husband, and then his sister. And then he calmed down. When he saw that he injured his own sister, she was bleeding, and she even said to him in his face, there's nothing you can do about it. Yes, it's true that we're Muslims, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can kill us or whatever. That was when he calmed down. He felt some shame at what he did. And then he started reading, after making the ghusl, he started reading the first few verses of Surah Taha, and that was when he found Iman, belief, faith entered his heart. And he said he wanted to go meet the Prophet. So he went to meet the Prophet, and he formally declared his conversion in front of the Prophet. And he asked the Prophet that the Muslims should go out and publicly go out and preach Islam, make da'wah. Up until then, it was only the Prophet who had been making the da'wah in public. Now, there were other people. Sayyidina Umar also, wasn't enough for him. He wanted to let everybody know that he converted. So he found one particular person who was well known, infamous for spreading rumors and things, news, whatever. And he went deliberately looked for him and told him that he converted to Islam. So this person went around telling everybody in Mecca. One thing I forgot to mention, after everybody had found out that Umar had converted, a large group of men surrounded Umar and started bashing him. A whole group of people bashed him. And Umar wanted that. He wanted to get everybody know, and he didn't care if he got bashed. He didn't care if he got killed. He also went to his uncle Abu Jahl, and told him in his face that he converted. I also mentioned the boycott. So by this time, Prophet's uncle Abu Talib had felt that there was the Prophet, his nephew, the Prophet was his life was in danger. So he got the two brotherly tribes, Banu Muttalib and Bani Hashim. So these were two related tribes. He got them to agree to protect the Prophet's life. And that was when the boycott was started, because Quraysh wanted to kill the Prophet. So does everybody understand why the boycott happened? Why the Bani Abdul Muttalib was boycotted? Can you tell me why? Sorry? Why was there a boycott? What was the muqaddam?
To force them to surrender and give the Prophet answers.
Yes. Yes. So in order to
make
kill
them
him.
starve.
Yes, in order to kill him. But the boycott was meant to last indefinitely. So they didn't care. They even withheld food from them. The boycott lasted for 3 years, and after 3 years, a number of people, non-Muslims, felt that they realized the boycott was inhumane. People were starving, were suffering. And these 5 persons eventually were ready to go and fight and argue with Quraysh, and they were going to go, and there was a document that was written inside the Kaaba, they were going to tear it out. At the same time this was happening, the Prophet received revelation that the document had been eaten by insects. So the Prophet told his uncle Abu Talib. Abu Talib went and spoke to Quraysh, said, this is what happened. Muhammad has told me this has happened. If he's lying, we'll hand him over to you. You can do whatever you like. Otherwise, if he's telling the truth, you must end this boycott. So they went and had a look, and they found the document was completely eaten except for one piece at the top that said on it was not Bismillah. And that was the end of the boycott. Now, we go on to the next lesson. Now, we've reached the 10th year of the prophethood, and now this is the year, is known as the year of sadness. In that year, the Prophet experienced the deaths of two very dear people to him in his life, his uncle Abu Talib and his wife Seerah Khadija radiallahu anha. Now, this happened just shortly after the end of the boycott. Now, the 3 years of the boycott were very difficult for Bani Abdul Manaf. They were starving. And Abu Talib was amongst the people who was, because he loved his prophet, his nephew, and he protected him. Even though he didn't believe, he didn't follow him in the message. He had reached 80 years of age, and his health was declining. Because of the boycott, maybe because his immune system had been weakened, compromised, and he became very ill. People were starting to realize that he might be actually dying now, because it was his final illness. Quraysh also realized that if after Abu Talib passes away, and they increased the persecution of the Muslims and the Prophet, that the Arabs everywhere would blame Quraysh, saying that they were taking advantage of the death of the uncle of the Prophet to increase the punishment of the Muslims and the persecution of the Prophet. So, in order to avoid them getting criticized, they formed a delegation of 25 people, and they went to meet Abu Talib to try and find find a solution without violence. The delegation consisted of Abu Jahl, Abu Sufyan, Utbah ibn Rabi'a, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, and quite a few other people. They tried again to give and take policy. So they were saying they were going to offer. They were saying that if the Prophet, they were willing to leave the Prophet and the Muslims alone, if they would leave the non-Muslims alone. So everybody minds their own business. And it sounds like a reasonable offer. Everybody minds their own business. You do your religion, you follow our religion. But imagine yourself living in a corrupt society where people are being oppressed. There's corruption. Slaves are being mistreated. There's all sorts of evils and all of filth happening. Would you be happy and content, or would you speak out against it? And this is a requirement actually for a Muslim, when he sees evil happening, to try and stop it. So the Prophet did not agree, did not accept that offer. So Abu Talib relayed the message. He relayed Quraysh's message to the Prophet, and the Prophet responded to him. He said, "Oh uncle, why don't you call them onto something better?" Abu Talib asked him, what is it that you invite them to? They're asking the Prophet. The Prophet replied, I invite them to say just one word that will give the supremacy over the Arabs and non-Arabs. The Quraysh delegation was there, and they heard this. They heard the Prophet say, I just want them to say one word. Abu Jahl said, just one word, we'll give him 10 words. 10 words. It sounded awesome, incredible, like an incredible offer. And even the Prophet said that would gain supremacy of the Arabs and non-Arabs if they would just say one word. And he said, the Prophet said, I want you to testify that there is no God. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And that was it. They lost their patience and they walked out. The non-Muslim delegation. They were saying, how can you expect us to combine all the deities into one God? It is really something incredible. And it was actually a verse that was revealed in response to that. Of course, we know that history proved what the Prophet said is correct. Saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah and following that and applying it into your life. For the Arabs, it allowed them to have supremacy. They conquered the Persians and defeated the Romans, conquered the Romans as well. Abu Talib passed away soon after that. His death was extremely sad for the Prophet because he had died without accepting Islam. And Abu Talib was the uncle who had replaced the Prophet's father. He'd raised the Prophet, he taught him a lot of things. Took him on journeys to Syria for trade. But he also supported the Prophet and protected the Prophet as much as he could. As being, after the death of his father, Abdul Muttalib, Abu Talib was the next in line. He was the eldest of the tribe, and he was able to utilize the resources of the entire tribe to protect the Prophet's life. So when he died, the next person after him, in seniority, was, the next uncle was Abu Lahab. He protected, and he loved the Prophet, he protected the Prophet. So when he didn't accept Islam, this was tragic for the Prophet. He died, and any person who today converts to Islam and their parents remain non-Muslims and they pass away, they'll feel the same sort of thing that the Prophet felt. Their parents died without accepting Islam. It means that they were destined for hellfire. The Prophet then, he said after the death of his uncle, the hadith says, مَا نَالَتْ مِنِّي قُرَيْشٌ شَيْئًا أَكْرَهُ حَتَّى مَاتَ أَبُو طَالِبٍ. So the Prophet was saying, whatever happened to him before the death of his uncle, it was nothing compared to what happened to him after the death of Abu Talib. The abuse and the physical violence that he experienced was much worse after the death of Abu Talib. One example, the Prophet was praying at the Kaaba. Abu Jahl and a few other his friends, his cronies, were sitting nearby. They decided to go and they dared each other to go and get the entrails of an animal that had been slaughtered. The entrails, the inside of it, the guts, they got, which you normally throw away. They got the entrails and they went, well, the Prophet was in prostration, in sujood, they put it on his back. And the Prophet remained in that position until his daughter Fatima came and removed all that from his back. And it was at this point, the Prophet, he sat up and made a dua. And this was a very unusual dua. The first dua, first time he would say this kind of dua. He said, Allahumma alayka bi Quraysh. He was now upset with Quraysh. He was asking Allah to deal with Quraysh. He said 3 times, Allahumma alayka bi Quraysh, alayka bi Quraysh. شق عليهم إذ عليهم قال وكانوا يرون أن so the nearby non-Muslims of Quraysh heard the Prophet making a dua against them to Allah, and they knew that making a dua in the city of Mecca was accepted by Allah. So if the Prophet was making a dua against them, they started to worry, they started to get scared from what the Prophet's saying dua was, the Prophet's dua. And then he said, Allahumma alayka bi Abi Jahl. He continued, please deal with Abu Jahl. Wa alayka bi Utbah ibn Rabi'a, wa Shayba ibn Rabi'a, wa Walid ibn Utbah, wa Umayyah ibn Khalaf. He listed some of the worst people. And later at the Battle of Badr, each one of those persons was killed in that Battle of Badr. The Prophet realized now that his presence in Mecca was no longer bearable, no longer tenable. He had to think of a way to leave Mecca, even though he didn't want to. He didn't really want to. A few days after, or maybe a few days before the death of Abu Talib, his wife, Seerah Khadija, also passed away. This was also a big tragedy for the Prophet. Seerah Khadija had been very supportive of him. She'd been the first to believe in his message. She had supported him throughout the entire marriage. She had been the mother for most of his children. And the Prophet compared her, said she was amongst the best women of the world in history. Compared to Sayyidah Maryam, the wife of Pharaoh, quite a few other people, great women mentioned in the Quran. The Prophet now was thinking, what should he do? He came to a conclusion, the decision to leave Mecca and to try to go to the city of Ta'if. Now, his choice of a Ta'if was not some random choice. A Ta'if was a very logical choice for the Prophet to make. Number one, the Ta'if was, in terms of importance in the Arabian Peninsula, it was second only to Mecca. The Ta'if was the home to one particular idol called Al-Lat, which all the Arabs would swear by. They would swear by Al-Lat. So this idol was housed in Ta'if, not in Mecca. The Sea of Taif was inhabited by a very, very powerful tribe called Bani Thaqif. If Bani Thaqif were to follow the Prophet, that would be usually bolster his support, and Quraysh would not be able to do anything to him. Thaqif was a very powerful tribe. Taif also was relatively close to Mecca, wasn't too far away, about 90 kilometers away. So Medina is about 500 kilometers away. And Abyssinia is even further away, and there's a sea in between Arabian Peninsula and Africa. So Taif wasn't too far away. Taif also was important because many people in Mecca even owned properties in Taif, farms, so growing crops and things. So if Taif were to be converted to Islam, it would be a major economic hit against Mecca. They would lose a lot of commerce and trade because they had a lot of these farms growing, things, kinds of crops. So the Messenger left Mecca in the month of Shawwal, on the 10th year of the Prophethood. So around the same month, or perhaps the month after Abu Talib passed away. So the Prophet didn't really spend much time in mourning. His main concern was a da'wah. He did the minimum, what he could for the mourning period, but he had to resume. Life had to keep going. So it happened. This was around the month of June, July. This was the hottest months of the year. It was the summer months. The Prophet decided to walk the entire distance, instead of hiring a camel. And he took his adopted son Zayd. Why did he choose Zayd instead of anybody else? He didn't want to raise any suspicions that he was going to go to a Taif. He wanted everybody to think he was just going for a walk with his son, because he was his adopted son. Nobody would suspect anything. So he took Zayd and they walked the whole distance, all 90 kilometers from Mecca to a Taif. So he arrives at a Taif, and the first thing he does is he goes and meets with the important people, the nobles, the rich people of Taif. He meets three sons of a man called Amr ibn Umayr. The three sons, Abd, Yadid, Mas'ud and Habib. So he sits with them, he introduces himself, he makes da'wah to them. So the first son, Abd Yadid, says, if Muhammad was the Prophet, Abd Yadid was ready to go all the way to the Kaaba in Mecca and to tear the cloth of the Kaaba in protest to Allah. How can Allah choose Muhammad as a Prophet? Very bad response. Mas'ud, the other next son, the brother, he said, how is it that Allah couldn't find anybody else better than Muhammad? The third one, Habib, he said, he's trying to pretend that he's very pious and noble. He said he can't talk to the Prophet in any case. He said, if the Prophet Muhammad is a real true Prophet, then he, Habib, is not up to his level. He's too inferior to him. He said, if the Prophet Muhammad is a liar, then Habib is above him. He's doesn't want to talk to him anyway. Does it make sense? So, in any case, he's not going to talk to the Prophet. The Prophet said, okay, fine, you don't want to accept, fine, no problem. But please keep it between us. Don't spread the news, don't tell anybody. Of course, they did the exact opposite. The news reached Mecca that the Prophet had went all the way to Taif to seek their protection and their help. The Prophet stayed in Taif for 10 days. He went around speaking to other important people in the town, in the city, but nobody accepted him. They accepted his message. After 10 days, they approached him and they kicked him out and said, we want you to leave. Of course, I think the story is well known that they set up 2 rows of servants on the path where the Prophet would be walking and his son, and Zayd, and they walked. While they walked, they were stoned. The servants stoned them and swore at them. This lasted for up to 5 kilometers out of Taif, 5 kilometers. Until finally the Prophet and Sidna Zayd found a garden with trees, and they entered this garden. And those servants backed away and left. They were too scared to enter because it was private property owned by somebody. The Prophet went, sat down by a tree, and by this stage he was exhausted, and it was just too much for him to bear. He started crying. He couldn't control himself. And he made a dua, a very beautiful dua. He's saying to Allah, Allah, I complain of my weakness, my lack of resources, and my insignificance in the eyes of the people. You are the most merciful and of the merciful. You are the Lord of the oppressed, and you are my Lord. To whom do you entrust me? To a distant stranger who frowns upon me, or to an enemy to whom you have given power over me. If you are not angry with me, then I care not. It doesn't care. But for your favours, what's encompassing for me? Basically, it was a very sad dua, asking Allah to help him. At this stage, there are two people from Mecca, the two enemies of the Prophet, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah and Shayba ibn Rabi'ah. They happened to be nearby, and they saw the Prophet in a very pitiful state. And they actually felt pity for him. So they sent one of the servants, a boy named Addas, with some dates, some grapes, to present to the Prophet. Addas presented the Prophet with the dates, the grapes to the Prophet. Prophet picked one grape, and before he was about to put it in his mouth, he said, Bismillah. Addas heard him and said, this is a very unusual phrase that Arabs, the people here, did not say that. So the Prophet asked him, what is your name? And he asked him, where are you from? So Addas said, he's from the city of Nineveh. So the Prophet said, the city of my brother Yunus, Prophet Yunus. Addas realized that that Muhammad was a true prophet, and he accepted it. He kissed his head and he accepted him as the prophet. Of course, the two men, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah and Shayba ibn Rabi'ah, saw that, and they were very unhappy. They called Addas over to them and said, do not follow this man. Your religion, because he was a Christian, he said, your religion is better than his religion. After all this, the Prophet resumed his journey back to Mecca, but this time his mind was so preoccupied, so stressed, and full of sadness, that he actually was unaware of his surroundings. For up to 30 kilometers walking, thinking. And as a hadith, he said he was unaware of what was happening. Up to 30 kilometers, until they reached a place called Qarn al-Tha'alib. It was there that Jibreel and another angel met him, and they said, they offered him to destroy two mountains around Mecca and to bury Mecca as punishment. The Prophet said no.
You mean Taif?
I wasn't sure about that. I said in the book said Mecca, but I thought Taif.
Maybe the mountains are around Taif and Mecca. Maybe the
Akshabain.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, it is a Taif, because the Prophet said no, do not do anything. And in future, what the Prophet said was the Prophet was very wise, because in future, after the Prophet passed away, or before he passed away, the whole Arabian Peninsula submitted to his rule. When he passed away, the entire Arabian Peninsula, except for 3 cities, rebelled: Mecca, Medina, and Taif. They stayed as part of supporting the Islamic nation. The Prophet continued until he reached a place called Wadi Nakhla, about 43 kilometers away from Mecca, and the Prophet stopped to rest. And when the Prophet rested, he prayed. And this time he started reciting Quran, and some of the jinn heard him reciting Quran, and they were converted, they became Muslims. So the whole trip wasn't really entirely, there was some bad things that happened to him, but it wasn't a complete waste. Addas converted, and some jinn also converted. Now the Prophet now is approaching Mecca. He knows he can't enter Mecca. He needs support. He needs protection. And he goes and approaches a number of different tribes. He knew that Bani Hashim, his own tribe, wouldn't protect him because, anybody can guess why? Abu? No, Abu Jahl. He's not Bani Hashim.
Abu Talib passed away.
Who?
Abu Talib
But?
Abu Lahab has become the second
Yes. Abu
head
Lahab.
of the tribe.
Yes, he's the next elder.
Oh.
So Abu Lahab is against the Prophet, so he's not going to protect him. He asks a number of different tribes, and he finally finds Mutan ibn Adayy from the tribe of Bani Nawfal. He agrees to protect the Prophet. So the Prophet enters Mecca now with an armed guard from that tribe. And that armed guard, he goes all the way to the Kaaba, he prays. Indicate that he hasn't changed, he's not going to stop making da'wah. Yeah. He prays and then goes home, and the same tribe puts armed guards at the front of outside his house to protect him. The Prophet knows that this arrangement cannot continue indefinitely, it's only a temporary arrangement. So he's looking for better arrangement. So the Hajj season now is starting, or about to start. So the Prophet now sees this as an opportunity, because there'll be delegations from all the different tribes coming to Mecca to make Hajj, pilgrimage. And the non-Muslim Arabs, they make pilgrimage to Mecca. So it was easier for him, they were coming to Mecca. He starts approaching a number of each delegation, and he introduces himself, he makes da'wah. But unfortunately, somebody else is following him. Who? Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab knows what the Prophet is doing, and after the Prophet has spoken to each delegation, he goes to each of those delegations and says, do not listen to him, and he's the uncle of the Prophet, and it makes the Prophet look bad, gives him a bad reputation. Because they were thinking, if that's his uncle, he knows him better. If his uncle is saying he's a lie, he's this and this and that, then we can't follow him. One tribe, however, was close to accepting the message and following the Prophet, the tribe of Bani Amir, but there was one condition. They would agree to follow the Prophet, but the condition was that after the Prophet passed away, that they would take over the leadership of the Islamic movement. They saw, the leader of that tribe anyway, that delegation, saw that the Prophet, there was potential that he could one day become victorious, and the Arabs would submit to him. So he was thinking, when that happens, their tribe would take over. He wasn't really thinking about the religion, he was thinking more about power. If the Muslims were to become victorious, then they would become the leaders of all the Arabs. The Prophet responded and said, it's all up to Allah what happens. Who decide who would lead the Muslims? At this, they didn't like that answer, Bani Amr, and they backed out. They said, we're not interested anymore in following you. Okay, that's it for now. So, inshallah, next lesson we'll cover the first page of Al-Aqaba. So, next time, the first page of Al-Aqaba, Bayt Al-Aqaba al-Ula.
Which day will be starting the lecture?
We are Monday, inshallah.
Are we going to stop in Ramadan? Because it's going to be...
One person suggested we continue, but after Fajr instead of after Isha, or before Isha. So I don't know. Is that something you'd be interested in, or do you want to just...
If I'm not working, I will stay.
Ah.
Yeah, if I'm not working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll just pause for 1 month and then continue after Ramadan.
Yeah.
Because every 5 or 6 days I have 2 days off.
Yeah.
If I don't go to the second job,
Yeah.
I stay here.
Yeah.
Or Fajr, inshallah.
Yeah. So it'll be either Monday or Thursday. Or Thursday will definitely be Ramadan, inshallah.
Yeah.
So it'll be Monday, this last lesson, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
سبحان الله وبحمده أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت